That was the first thing she said when she stepped into my kitchen barefoot, smiling, and holding my son's hand like she'd won something precious. I remember the sound of the rain outside that morning. It wasn't heavy, just a soft drizzle tapping against the window pane, the kind that made the whole world smell like wet soil and nostalgia. I had just finished setting the table for breakfast when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, my son stood there, taller than I remembered, his arm wrapped around a woman I had only met twice before. Her name was Emily. Pretty face, polite smile, always with a phone in her hand. I had no reason to dislike her, not yet. "Mom," Daniel said, grinning from ear to ear. "We have some news." I thought maybe they'd gotten engaged, or maybe they were moving in together. Something normal, something you could plan for. But Emily looked straight at me and said, "We got married yesterday." Just like that. The words hit the air like thunder. I felt my hands go cold. I smiled because that's what mothers do when they don't understand what's happening yet. But inside something cracked. My son, my only child, had gotten married without me there. No phone call, no photo, not even a text. "Oh," I managed, my voice thinner than I wanted it to sound. "Yesterday." Emily nodded, her eyes glinting like she was proud of the secret. "We didn't want to make a big fuss," she said. "Just a small courthouse thing." Daniel looked awkward, like he knew how it must have felt for me. But he didn't say anything, just squeezed her shoulder. That silence told me everything I needed to know. Before that morning, life had been quiet, too quiet maybe. After my husband passed away 5 years ago, the house became still in ways that only empty homes can be. I filled my days with gardening, volunteering at the library, and hosting Sunday dinners for Daniel whenever he could come. He was my pride. My boy who grew into a man, gentle but ambitious, the kind who'd always call before he visited, always hug me twice before leaving. When he met Emily, I remember thinking she was perfect for him. Confident, independent, and modern. I tried to welcome her, even though she seemed a little distant. She'd come for dinner, compliment my cooking without touching half the food, and spend most of the evening scrolling on her phone. Still, Daniel looked happy, so I let it be. I remember once, while washing dishes after dinner, I asked him, "You really love her, don't you?" He smiled, the kind that made him look like a boy again. "Yeah, Mom. She's different. I think she gets me." That was enough for me. Or at least I thought it was. But after that morning, the "we got married yesterday" morning, something in me couldn't settle. They said they'd been planning it for weeks. Said they wanted something intimate. But I couldn't understand why intimacy meant excluding family. Why my presence, my blessing, my love weren't part of that plan. That night after they left, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the 2 untouched plates of breakfast still on the table. The eggs had gone cold. The rain had stopped. But the silence was louder than ever. A week later they came over again, this time with papers. Daniel said they were looking for a place nearby, maybe even wanted to buy the house next door. I thought it was a sweet idea to have my son so close. Until Emily interrupted. "Oh, actually, we're looking at something bigger. A duplex, maybe. We might rent part of it out." Something about the way she said we made my stomach twist. She sounded like someone who had already decided everything. Daniel just nodded along. When they left, I stood by the window and watched them walk down the driveway. Emily was talking fast, waving her hands, and Daniel was listening, his head slightly lowered like he was trying to keep up. I knew that look. My son had always been gentle. Too gentle sometimes. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the wedding, how it must have happened. The courthouse, the signatures, the empty witness chairs where I should have been. I tried to tell myself it wasn't personal. But every time I looked at the photo of my husband on the mantel, I heard his voice in my head. "Something's off, Mary. Don't ignore it." So I didn't. A few days later Daniel called. "Mom," he said, sounding tired. "Emily's working late tonight. Mind if I come over for dinner?" Of course I didn't. I made his favorite chicken pot pie, mashed potatoes, the kind of meal that carries more comfort than calories. We talked about work, about his plans, about the weather. But I noticed how often his eyes drifted to his phone. How he hesitated before answering questions about Emily. Finally, I asked, "Are you happy, Daniel?" He looked at me, really looked, and forced a smile. "Yeah, Mom. Just adjusting, you know." Something in me sank. That night, as he left, he hugged me longer than usual. Then under his breath he said, "Thanks for always being here." It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it, like he needed it to mean something more. A week passed before I saw him again. This time Emily came alone. She said Daniel was busy with some errands. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a wedding photo. It wasn't what I expected. No flowers, no family, no smiles. Just Daniel in a plain gray suit, Emily in a cream dress, both standing stiff in front of a courthouse door. I looked closer, and that's when I noticed the date. Not yesterday. It was dated 2 weeks earlier. 2 weeks. I felt my throat tighten. "Emily," I said slowly, "I thought you said you got married yesterday." She blinked, caught off guard. Then she smiled, a small nervous smile. "Oh, I must have mixed up the dates. It all happened so fast." But her hands were trembling. That's when the first seed of doubt took root. Because if she'd lied about the date, what else wasn't true? That night, I sat by the window again, staring into the darkness outside. The wedding date looped in my mind like a whisper. I wanted to ask Daniel, but something told me not to. Not yet. Instead, I started paying attention to the small things. The missed calls. The unreturned messages. The faint tension in my son's voice every time he mentioned her. And one night when I couldn't sleep, I did something I never thought I would. I opened Facebook, typed her name, and what I found there made my heart pound. A private post, visible to friends only. But the preview showed a comment. "You really pulled it off, girl. Congrats on the move." The move? I clicked further. And there, hidden in her photos, was a picture of a house. A house I'd never seen. And the caption read, "New beginnings, with everything finally in my name." My name. Not our name. Her name. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the glow of my laptop, staring at that single caption until the words started to blur. Everything finally in my name. At first, I thought maybe it was just a figure of speech, something people say when they move into their first home. But the more I thought about it, the more wrong it felt. Daniel hadn't mentioned buying a house yet. In fact, the last time we spoke, he'd said they were looking. So whose house was this? The next morning, I made a pot of coffee, the strong kind I usually save for company, and waited for Daniel to call. He didn't. By noon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I dialed his number. "Hey, Mom," he answered, sounding rushed. "Can I call you later?" "I just wanted to ask about the house," I said, pretending my voice was casual. "What house?" "The one Emily posted online. It looks lovely." There was silence on the line. Then a soft exhale. "She shouldn't have posted that," he muttered. "Daniel." I pressed. He hesitated. "It's nothing, Mom. Just a small investment she made before the wedding." Investment? Yeah, her savings. Don't worry about it. But I did worry, because I knew my son. He'd never been secretive before, not about anything that mattered. That evening, I took a walk to clear my head. The streets smelled of rain again. Seems like every big moment in my life happens under gray skies. I thought about the house, the wedding date, the look on Emily's face when she'd mixed up the story. Something wasn't adding up. A few weeks later, Daniel invited me for dinner at their new place. I remember standing outside the gate, looking up at the house. 2 stories, beige siding, a wide porch, beautiful but cold, like a magazine picture. Emily greeted me at the door, dressed too perfectly for a casual evening. "Come in, Mom," she said sweetly, though the word Mom sounded rehearsed. The living room smelled like new paint and expensive candles. Daniel was in the kitchen, stirring pasta like his life depended on it. He looked tense. We ate in polite silence for a while. Then Emily excused herself to take a phone call. That's when Daniel spoke. "Mom," he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "I need to tell you something before you hear it from someone else." My heart stopped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, bank documents. My husband's old savings account. "I transferred the funds," he said, "to help with the down payment." I stared at him. "What funds?" "The inheritance Dad left me. The one you've been keeping for me." I felt the room spin. "Daniel, that money wasn't just for a house. It was your security. Your father wanted." "I know what he wanted," he interrupted, his voice trembling. "But Emily said it was the right time. The market's good. She even talked to a lawyer about it." "A lawyer?" I whispered. He nodded. "She said it's better if everything's under one name, for tax reasons." I went still. "Under her name?" He didn't answer. I looked at the table, the fancy plates, the silver napkin rings, the meal that had gone cold between us. "Daniel," I said softly, "did you sign anything?" He looked up then, eyes filled with something between shame and confusion. "It's just paperwork, Mom. I trust her." I wanted to scream, but instead I just whispered, "Your father worked 40 years for that money." Emily returned then, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Everything okay?" I excused myself early, saying I wasn't feeling well. When I got home, I cried like I hadn't cried in years. Not just because of the money, but because I realized I was losing my son to someone who knew exactly how to manipulate him. The next morning I called the bank. I still had partial access to the account for record keeping. The manager confirmed it. The funds were withdrawn in full 2 weeks earlier, transferred to a new account under Emily's name. That was the same week they'd told me they'd gotten married. The timing hit me like a brick. She hadn't mixed up the wedding date. She'd moved it forward to get legal access to my son's inheritance. And Daniel, my sweet, trusting boy, had no idea. I spent the next few days gathering what little information I could. I called the lawyer they'd mentioned. The receptionist told me the firm had helped Mrs. Emily Hayes with property transfer documents. Mrs. Hayes. She'd already changed her name on everything, bank, deed, utilities, within days of the wedding. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, holding those notes, feeling a strange calm wash over me. The kind of calm that only comes when grief turns into purpose. I wasn't going to let my husband's legacy vanish into someone else's greed. But I also knew I had to be careful. Emily was clever. She'd played her cards quietly, always smiling, always polite. If I accused her too soon, she'd twist it, make me the meddling mother-in-law. So I waited. I smiled when they visited. I listened. I played my role. And then, one afternoon, opportunity came knocking, literally. I was pruning the roses when a man in a brown jacket approached. "Mrs. Hayes?" he asked. "No," I said. "That's my daughter-in-law." He looked surprised. "Ah, well." She listed this address as a reference on her mortgage application. Mortgage. He handed me a copy of a form. My husband's name, Daniel's father, was listed under previous property owner. I blinked. That can't be right. My husband's been gone for 5 years. The man frowned. Strange. It must be an error. But these details came directly from her documents. After he left, I called Daniel. He sounded uneasy when I mentioned it. "I'll talk to her, Mom," he said quickly. "Please just stay out of it for now." But I couldn't. That evening I drove to their house. I told myself I'd only talk, not argue. But when I arrived, I saw something that froze me in place. Through the living room window, Emily was sitting with another man. A man I didn't recognize. Papers spread across the table. She was laughing. He was pointing at something, signing a page. I stood there in the rain, hidden behind the hedges, watching the pen move across the paper. And in that moment I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. Plan to take everything. I turned away before they could see me, my hands trembling, my chest tight. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel like it could anchor me. By the time I parked in my driveway, I'd made up my mind. If she wanted to play smart, I'd be smarter. If she thought I was just a grieving widow, she was about to find out how sharp a quiet woman's mind could be. That night, I sat in my husband's old study, the one I hadn't touched since the funeral. The air smelled faintly of cedar and dust, the kind of scent that carries memories like ghosts. His leather chair creaked when I sat down, and for a moment I imagined him there, reading the evening paper, glasses low on his nose. He'd been meticulous with everything. His files, his receipts, every letter neatly labeled. That was his way of protecting us. And now it would have to be mine. I opened the drawer where he used to keep the family records. Inside, I found the old folder marked Daniel's inheritance. Inside were copies of the will, bank statements, even correspondence with the lawyer who'd helped set it up. I studied each line carefully. The money was meant solely for Daniel's personal use, education, investment, or emergencies. It wasn't joint property, even after marriage, unless he willingly added her to it. He hadn't, which meant what she'd done wasn't just morally wrong. It could be legally challenged. I took out my notebook and began writing everything down. Dates, transactions, photos, that Facebook post. Every detail that tied her to the deception. By the time I was done, the clock read 3 a.m. I closed the folder and whispered to the empty room. "We'll fix this, love. I promise." The next few days, I played the part of the doting mother-in-law perfectly. I baked. I smiled. I even complimented Emily's new dress when she and Daniel dropped by. She had that same effortless confidence. Hair sleek, nails immaculate, perfume too strong for my liking. "Mom, isn't the house lovely?" she asked, flashing her diamond band as she sipped her coffee. "It is," I said softly. "You've made quite a home." She smiled wide like she'd already won. "We're thinking of throwing a housewarming next month. Maybe invite some of your friends too." "Oh, that's lovely," I said. "You'll have to tell me the date when it's final." "Of course," she said. But I could see it, the flicker in her eyes when she realized I wasn't angry anymore. She thought I'd given up. That was the beginning of her mistake. The following week, I paid a visit to the lawyer who had helped set up my husband's trust years ago. A kind man named Mr. Gibson. His office hadn't changed in decades. Stacks of dusty books, the smell of old paper, the faint hum of a fan that had seen better years. He greeted me warmly. "Mary, it's been too long. How's Daniel doing?" I took a breath. That's what I came to talk about. I laid out everything. Quietly, carefully, without bitterness. Just facts. The wedding, the bank transfer, the property deed, and the strange man I'd seen signing papers. When I finished, Mr. Gibson sat back, steepling his fingers. "Mary, this doesn't sound like coincidence. If what you're saying is true, your daughter-in-law may have committed financial fraud." I swallowed hard. I don't want to destroy their marriage. I just want my husband's legacy protected. He nodded. "We can do that. I'll draft a request for an account audit and freeze any joint property transactions until the ownership dispute is reviewed." "Will Daniel get in trouble?" I asked. "Not if we handle it delicately," he said. "But he needs to know what's happening." That was the part that scared me most. 2 days later, I asked Daniel to meet me for lunch. We went to the little cafe near the park, the one where he used to eat pancakes as a boy. He looked tired, older somehow. "Daniel," I began, stirring my tea to hide the tremor in my hand, "I need to talk to you about Emily." His fork froze midair. "Mom, please don't start. I'm not here to fight," I said gently. "But I've seen the papers, the money, the house, and I know she's been keeping things from you." His face went pale. "What papers?" I slid a small folder across the table, copies of what Mr. Gibson had printed for me. "Just look." He opened it, his eyes darting from line to line. When he reached the deed listing only Emily Hayes as the property owner, his hand began to shake. I thought she said it was temporary. Just until we settled some documents, he whispered. She's been using your father's name, Daniel, I said softly, to secure loans, to legitimize her paperwork, without your consent. He pushed the folder away, rubbing his temples. Why would she do that? Because she's smart, and because she thinks you won't question her. For a long time he said nothing. Then quietly, I don't want to believe you. I know. But deep down, I think I already do. I reached across the table and took his hand. This isn't about revenge, Daniel. It's about truth. And once you see it clearly, you'll know what to do. He nodded, eyes glassy, jaw clenched. Let me handle it. Just be careful, I whispered. That night I waited by the phone, heart pounding with every passing hour. By midnight it rang. It was Daniel. His voice was broken. Mom, she's gone. What? She took everything. Cleared out the account. Moved out this evening. I came home to half-empty drawers and a note. My throat tightened. What did the note say? He hesitated, then read aloud. Don't try to find me. I did what I had to do. You'll be fine without me. I closed my eyes, the weight of it settling in my chest. Where are you now? I asked. Home. I don't even know if it's mine anymore. I'll be right there, I said. When I arrived, the house felt colder than ever. Half the furniture gone, drawers pulled open, papers scattered. Daniel sat on the floor, surrounded by the debris of his short-lived marriage. I can't believe I didn't see it, he said, voice cracking. She fooled you because you're good, I said softly. Because you trust people. He laughed bitterly. And look where that got me. I knelt beside him and took his hand. You'll rebuild. We both will. But first, we'll get back what's yours. Over the next few weeks, with Mr. Gibson's help, we filed reports, froze the accounts, and traced every transaction. It turned out Emily had taken out loans using Daniel's name as guarantor. The bank suspended the transfers pending investigation. It wasn't about vengeance anymore, it was survival. And in the middle of all that chaos, I realized something strange. For the first time in years, Daniel started coming home again. Not the house he shared with her, but home. He'd sit at my kitchen table eating my pot pie, his eyes tired but steady. And every so often he'd say quietly, "Thanks for not giving up on me, Mom." It would take months to sort through the legalities. But as the truth began to surface, something unexpected happened. Emily's lies started to unravel publicly. A neighbor came forward saying she'd been bragging about owning her husband's inheritance. Another mentioned seeing her with that same man I'd spotted, the one who'd helped her sign the mortgage. He wasn't a lawyer as she'd claimed. He was a real estate agent and her ex-boyfriend. It was all a performance. And Daniel finally saw it for what it was. By the time the house was reclaimed and the accounts restored, Emily had vanished from town. No forwarding address, no trace. Just an echo of deceit that had changed us both. But strangely, amid the wreckage, I felt a quiet peace beginning to return. The truth had cost us dearly, but it had also set us free. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, calls, and quiet dinners where neither of us spoke much. It's strange how silence changes after betrayal. It used to mean comfort, the kind of silence you share with someone you trust. Now it was something else. Heaviness, guilt, grief. Daniel moved back into his old room for a while. I tried not to hover, but it was hard not to. Every morning I'd hear him moving around upstairs, the creak of floorboards, the sound of the shower running too long, like he was trying to wash the past off his skin. One evening I found him sitting on the porch steps, staring out into the dark. I brought him a cup of tea. The night smelled like wet grass and distant rain again. It had rained a lot that year, as if the sky itself couldn't stop crying for us. "Mom," he said quietly. I feel so stupid. I sat beside him. You're not stupid. You're human. You wanted to believe in love. That's not a weakness. He looked down, his hands wrapped around the cup. I kept thinking I could fix it, that if I just worked harder, she'd love me the way I loved her. She didn't want love, Daniel, I said softly. She wanted control. He nodded, a tear sliding down his cheek. Dad always warned me about people like that. I smiled sadly. He warned both of us. But some lessons we only learn by surviving them. We sat there in silence for a while, the crickets filling in the words we didn't know how to say. The truth has a way of spreading quietly, like smoke under a closed door. A few weeks after the investigation started, people began talking. It turned out Emily had more than one trail of half-finished stories behind her. Business partners she'd borrowed money from, friends she'd ghosted after taking loans, even a previous fiancé she'd left days before their wedding. The news reached her workplace first. Her manager called Daniel, asking if he knew where she was. They'd found inconsistencies in her payroll files, fake references, duplicated accounts, the kind of trail that only made sense to someone who'd done this before. It was like watching a puzzle snap into place piece by painful piece. One afternoon a detective called. They'd found a paper trail, property under her name, but purchased with Daniel's account as guarantor. Fraud, plain and simple. She hadn't covered her tracks as neatly as she thought. I'll never forget Daniel's face when he hung up that call. He didn't look angry. He just looked empty. She's going to face charges, he said flatly. Are you sure you want that? I asked. He hesitated. I don't know. I want it to mean something. All of it. Then make it mean something, I said. Not by punishing her, but by choosing better next time. By the time summer came around, word had spread through our little town. At the market, people would lower their voices when they saw me, whispering things like, "Poor Mary," or "Such a shame about that girl." I didn't correct them. I didn't need to. The truth was already doing its work. But I did notice one thing. Sympathy is a double-edged sword. Some people mean it. Others just enjoy the story. So I learned to walk past the whispers, to smile politely, and to hold my head high. Because dignity once lost is hard to get back. But when you carry it quietly, people see it. One afternoon, I found Daniel sorting through a box of old photos. He was pulling out pictures of his father, of his childhood, of better times. Thinking of donating some of these? I asked. He shook his head. No, I'm keeping them. I forgot who I was for a while. He held up a photo. Him as a boy, holding a fishing rod with his father grinning behind him. He always said, "Don't hand your trust to anyone who hasn't earned it." I nodded. Your father was a wise man, but he also believed in forgiveness. Daniel gave me a small smile. You think I should forgive her? Not for her, I said. For you. So you can move on. He looked away, eyes glistening. Maybe someday. A few months later, we got the final call from Mr. Gibson. The bank had reversed most of the fraudulent transfers. The property was legally restored under Daniel's name. He came home that evening with a quiet expression, a mix of relief and exhaustion. It's over, he said simply. No, sweetheart, I replied. It's just beginning. He frowned. What do you mean? You've been through hell, but you're still standing. That means you get to decide what your life looks like now. Not her. He nodded slowly. Maybe I'll sell the house. Start fresh. Maybe that's a good idea, I said. Some places hold too many ghosts. That weekend we went together to clear out the last of his things. The house looked different now, hollow, stripped of its pretense. The fancy furniture she'd chosen was gone, the walls bare. But there was something freeing about it too. In the living room, Daniel found her wedding ring sitting on the mantel. Just sitting there, as if she'd left it on purpose. He stared at it for a long time. Then, without a word, he placed it in an empty jar and sealed the lid. I watched him do it, proud in a quiet, aching way. Some goodbyes don't need words. Afterward, we walked out onto the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in orange and gold, the same colors that used to glow through our kitchen window when Daniel was a boy. He turned to me and said, "You know, Mom, I thought this would destroy me, but maybe it was supposed to teach me." I smiled. Everything teaches us something, even heartbreak. He looked down the road, hands in his pockets. "What do you think it taught you?" "That sometimes," I said, "love means letting your child break and trusting that they'll rebuild stronger." He nodded slowly. "And what if I never trust anyone again?" "Oh, you will," I said gently, "because your heart's still kind. And kind hearts heal eventually." He didn't answer, but I saw it, the small lift in his chest, the way his shoulders eased. The first quiet sign of peace. That night back home, I sat alone in the living room. The clock ticked softly, the house finally calm again. I poured myself a cup of tea and whispered to the empty air. "We did it, love. We kept our promise." Outside, the rain began again, soft, steady, cleansing. For the first time in months, I didn't mind the sound. Because sometimes, when life falls apart, it's just making room for something better. The days turned into months, and for the first time in a long time, peace didn't feel foreign. It wasn't loud or triumphant. It was soft, like a breeze through open windows, or the hum of a morning kettle before sunrise. Daniel started helping me with the garden again. The roses that had nearly withered during those dark months began to bloom, pale and tender. It felt symbolic somehow, that even something hurt and neglected could find life again if tended with care. He'd changed, not hardened but steadier. His smile, though quieter, carried more truth. One morning, as we planted new jasmine along the fence, he said, "Mom, I'm thinking of starting my own business. Something small, just mine." I smiled, brushing the soil from my gloves. "Your father would be proud." He looked up at the sky where the light was just breaking through the clouds. "I hope so." We didn't talk about Emily much after that. There was no point. She had been a storm, and storms by nature move on. But they always leave the ground richer somehow, clearer, ready for new roots. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but when I opened it, my heart skipped. It was from Emily. Just a few lines, no apology, no excuses, just this: "I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope one day Daniel understands why I did what I did. I grew up with nothing. I didn't know how to stop wanting more." I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and put it away in a drawer. That night I told Daniel. He read it silently, then handed it back. "I don't hate her anymore," he said softly, "but I don't pity her either." "Good," I said. "That's the right balance." He looked thoughtful. "Do you think people like that can ever change?" I considered the question, the sound of the clock ticking between us. "Maybe. But it's not our job to wait and see." He nodded. "Yeah. I think I'm finally ready to let it go." In letting it go, something else returned, laughter. Not forced or awkward, but real. The kind that fills the kitchen again when you least expect it. One evening, we were making dinner together when the radio played one of his father's favorite songs. "What a Wonderful World." Daniel chuckled. "You used to dance to this in the kitchen." "I still do," I said, wiping my hands on a towel and swaying to the rhythm. He laughed, shaking his head. "You're impossible." "Someone has to be," I teased. For a moment we were just us again. A mother and son, not victims of deceit but survivors of it. By autumn, Daniel had sold the house. He started renting a small place nearby, humble, warm, his own. He named his new business after his father, Hayes Home Repairs. It wasn't grand, but it was honest work. The kind of thing that rebuilt not just houses but lives. Sometimes he'd come by after work, hands covered in paint, smiling like the boy I used to know. He'd tell me about the people he met, the jobs he did, and I could see the spark returning. I once asked him, "Do you ever think you'll marry again?" He paused thinking, "Maybe. But next time, I'll bring her to Sunday dinner first." We both laughed at that, really laughed. The kind of laughter that washes away the last of the hurt. There's something you learn after a betrayal that deep. You start seeing truth in small things again. In how someone looks you in the eye when they speak. In the tone of their voice when they say, "Thank you." In the way you sleep at night, peaceful when you've done right by yourself. I started volunteering again. This time with women who'd lost their savings or homes to deceit. Some were older than me, some younger, all carrying different versions of the same ache. I'd tell them what I'd learned. That being betrayed doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. And healing isn't about pretending it didn't happen. It's about refusing to let it define who you are. One Sunday evening, Daniel brought over a young woman named Clara. "Mom," he said almost sheepishly, "this is a friend." She had kind eyes and paint on her jeans. She was a mural artist, quiet but grounded, the sort of person who looked comfortable in her own silence. As we sat down to dinner, I caught a glimpse of something rare in Daniel's expression: ease. Not infatuation, not performance, just peace. After they left, I stood by the window watching them walk down the path. She slipped her hand into his, and he didn't flinch or hide it, just held it steady. And I smiled. Not because I thought this was a fairy tale ending, life rarely is, but because I saw my son whole again. That night, as I washed the dishes, I looked at my reflection in the window. I saw someone older, yes, but stronger too. Someone who had learned the quiet power of patience. I realized something simple. We spend so much time trying to shield the people we love from pain. But sometimes pain is the very thing that reveals who they really are. Daniel had learned to stand on his own, and I had learned that letting go doesn't mean losing. It means making space for what's real. The rain began again, soft and rhythmic. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't close the window. I just let it fall. Because peace doesn't always come in sunlight. Sometimes it arrives in the rain. Sometimes I still think about that day. Standing in my kitchen, hearing my daughter-in-law say, "We got married yesterday." I didn't know then that those words would unravel everything I believed about trust, about love, even about family. But life has a way of teaching us through heartbreak. It doesn't always whisper. Sometimes it cracks you open so you can finally see. Looking back now, I don't see myself as the victim of Emily's lies. I see a woman who learned the difference between protecting her child and rescuing him. Because love, real love, doesn't mean shielding someone from pain. It means standing beside them while they face it. I watched my son break, and then I watched him build himself again. And in that rebuilding, I found pieces of my own strength I didn't know were still there. If you've ever been betrayed by family, by a partner, by someone you trusted, you know how it feels to question everything. To wonder if kindness was a mistake. But let me tell you something. Kindness is never wasted. It's a reflection of who you are, not of who they were. Maybe you've lost money. Maybe you've lost years. Maybe you've lost faith. But you can still keep your dignity. And that, my dear, is priceless. So tonight, when the rain falls outside your window, let it remind you, storms don't last. And even after the worst downpour, the ground still knows how to bloom. Tell me in the comments, would you have done what I did? Would you have stayed quiet and gathered proof, or confronted her the first time she lied? I'd love to hear your story. And if this one touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes the hardest stories are the ones that bring us home.